At midnight, the girl everyone called worthless dared the most dangerous alpha in America to claim her, and the entire room went silent because the king opened his eyes. Alara Hayes stood beneath the crystal lights of the midnight claiming ball with her hands clenched at her sides and her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The ballroom of Silverpine Hall glittered like a dream meant for someone else. All black marble floors, silver banners, and wolves dressed in velvet and diamonds. But every beautiful thing in that room seemed built to remind her that she did not belong. Her dress had once been white. Now the hem was frayed. One sleeve had been carefully mended by her own hand, and the thin satin could not hide the chill crawling over her skin. Around her, airs of powerful packs whispered behind gloved hands. Omega, wolfless, unclaimed. The words followed her like smoke. At the center of the room, Mason Vale stood with Vanessa hard on his arm, looking every inch the future alpha he had promised he would become with Alara beside him. That promise had died before sunset. Now Vanessa wore the red silk gown meant for a Luna, her golden hair pinned with moonstone combs, her smile soft enough to look innocent and sharp enough to cut. Mason did not meet Alara's eyes when the pack attorney stepped forward and unrolled the transfer contract. By order of Silverpine Pack, the man announced, his voice carrying across the silent floor. Alara Hayes is to be released from all prior informal attachments and transferred to Black Hollow Pack at the final stroke of midnight. Alara's breath caught. Black Hollow, a pack buried beyond the northern tree line, known for taking unwanted wolves and making sure they never came back to tell anyone what became of them. She looked at Mason then, waiting for one flicker of shame, one memory of the boy who had once walked 3 miles in the rain to bring her medicine when she was sick. He gave her nothing. Vanessa tilted her head with a sigh that sounded almost kind. Don't look so surprised, Alara. You always wanted a place. Now someone is giving you one. Laughter rippled through the court. Alara's throat tightened, but she did not lower her head. She had spent years being taught to make herself smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. Tonight, they had dressed up her exile and called it law. The clock above the eastern arch showed 11:57. 3 minutes, and her name would no longer belong to her. Her gaze moved past Mason, past Vanessa, past the elders who had watched her grow up and chosen silence every time, until it landed on the black throne at the far end of the hall. King Rowan Blackthorn sat there as still as a statue carved from winter, broad shoulders draped in a dark coat, black hair shadowing his brow, one hand resting against the arm of his throne. The Alpha King of North Fong had not spoken all night. He did not need to. His silence had weight. His presence alone made every alpha in the room careful with their breathing. Alara should have looked away. Everyone knew better than to stare at Rowan Blackthorn. But something old and reckless stirred beneath her ribs, something that felt less like courage and more like the last spark before a candle died. Vanessa's smile widened as the attorney lifted the silver pen. Any final words from the unwanted? She asked. The room waited for Alara to cry, to beg, to break prettily in front of them. Instead, Alara stepped forward. Her knees trembled, but she kept walking until the whispers fell away one by one. Mason frowned. Alara, don't embarrass yourself. That was when she looked straight at the throne, straight at the Alpha King. Her voice was not loud, but it carried through the ballroom like a match struck in the dark. If I am so worthless, let your king prove it. A hush dropped over the court. Alara felt every eye turn toward her, felt the air tighten, felt Vanessa's smile vanish. Still, she raised her chin. Let him claim me. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then King Rowan Blackthorn opened his eyes, and they were gold. The gold in Rowan Blackthorn's eyes did not brighten like candlelight. It cut through the ballroom like a warning. Alara felt the change before anyone spoke, a deep pressure rolling across the marble floor, pressing against her skin, sliding beneath her ribs, until her breath caught. Every wolf in Silverpine Hall seemed to remember at once that there were alpha heirs, there were pack leaders, and then there was the king. Mason's face drained of color. Vanessa stepped half a pace back, the red silk of her gown whispering over the floor. The pack attorney froze with the silver pen still lifted above the contract, as if his hand no longer belonged to him. Alara stood alone beneath the lights, feeling the weight of what she had done settle over her like ice. No one challenged the Alpha King, not in anger, not in grief. not even as a joke. The old laws were carved into every pack child before they learned to shift. A public claim challenge before the throne could be accepted, ignored, or punished as an insult to royal blood. Alara had known that. Some part of her had chosen it anyway. Anything was better than being handed over while everyone watched, and called it mercy. Mason recovered first, though his voice came out thinner than usual. Your Majesty, forgive her. She is upset. She does not understand what she is saying. Alara's nails bit into her palms. He had used that tone with her since they were children, gentle enough to sound protective, cruel enough to erase her. She has always been unstable when corrected, Vanessa added, placing one delicate hand over her heart. The rejection embarrassed her. She is trying to drag the court into her shame. The words moved through the room, finding easy places to land. A few elders nodded. Someone near the west wall whispered that a wolfless Omega should have been removed before the royal guests arrived. Alara's face warmed, but her spine stayed straight. She had been called weak so many times that the word had become weather. Tonight, it could still sting, but it could not make her bow. Then Rowan moved. It was only his hand lifting from the arm of the throne, only the quiet shift of a man rising to his feet, but the entire ballroom reacted as if thunder had cracked inside the walls. Chairs scraped back, heads lowered. Even the alpha of Silver Pine, Mason's father, dropped his gaze to the floor. Rowan descended the steps from the throne slowly, each step measured. Controlled, absolute. He was taller than Mason by several inches, dressed in black with a silver clasp at his throat, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over the pale stone beneath him. He did not look hurried. He did not look angry. That was somehow worse. Anger could be begged away. This silence felt like judgment. Alara's heart hammered harder with every step he took toward her. The air changed around him, colder, sharper, carrying the scent of pine forest after snowfall, and something darker beneath it, like a storm waiting behind a mountain ridge. Her skin prickled, deep inside her chest. In the place everyone had told her was empty, something stirred. Not enough to be a voice. Not enough to be a wolf. Just a sudden, impossible ache, as if a locked door had heard the key turn somewhere far away. Rowan stopped several feet from her. He did not touch her. He did not ask her to repeat herself. His gaze moved over her face, not with pity, not with the dismissive hunger she had learned to expect from powerful men, but with a terrible focus that made her feel seen down to the bones. Mason hurried forward, then stopped when two royal guards shifted their stance. Your Majesty, she already belongs to a transfer order. Black Hollow has paid the settlement fee. The document is lawful. Rowan's eyes did not leave Alara. Lawful, he said, the single word low enough to make the candles tremble. The attorney swallowed and offered the parchment with shaking hands. Signed by the Silver Pine Council, Your Majesty. Rowan finally looked away from Alara. The loss of his gaze should have brought relief. Instead, her lungs felt suddenly empty. He took the parchment, glanced at it once, and the corner of his mouth hardened. You dressed a sale as a transfer. No one answered. The clock above the eastern arch clicked to 11:58. 2 minutes. Alara heard it like a heartbeat outside her body. Vanessa's eyes flashed with panic before she covered it with sweetness. Your Majesty, Black Hollow requested her, because she has no viable wolf and no confirmed mate bond. Silver Pine only did what was practical. Surely the throne has no interest in a pack burden. That word struck deeper than Alara expected. Burden. She saw, for one brief second, her own life through their eyes. The extra plate at the table, the girl left off invitation lists, the quiet problem nobody wanted to name. Her throat tightened, but before shame could swallow her, Rowan turned his head toward Vanessa. The room went still again. Speak about her like that once more, he said, calm and cold, and you will leave this hall without a voice in this court. Vanessa's lips parted. No sound came out. Mason stiffened, outrage flickering beneath fear. She manipulated this moment. She used her name. She should answer for that. Rowan stepped closer to Alara. Not close enough to trap her, but close enough that she had to tilt her chin to keep looking at him. His gaze lowered, not to her dress, not to the place where everyone else saw poverty and disgrace, but to her wrist. Alara followed his eyes and felt her stomach drop. The thin ribbon tied around her left wrist had loosened. Beneath it, The small crescent-shaped scar she had hidden since childhood glimmered faintly silver under the ballroom lights. She pulled her hand back on instinct. Rowan saw the movement. His expression changed so slightly that no one else might have noticed, but Alara did. The hard line of his mouth went still. His eyes darkened from gold to something molten and ancient. "Where did you get that mark?" he asked. Alara's breath faltered. "I do not know." It was the truth, and it sounded useless. She had been told it was from a childhood fever, from a fall, from anything adults could say quickly before changing the subject. Rowan's gaze sharpened. "Who hid you?" The question struck the room harder than any accusation. Hidden. Not worthless. Not unwanted. Hidden. Alara stared at him, pulse roaring in her ears. For the first time all night, Mason looked truly afraid. Vanessa's fingers curled into the side of her gown. The attorney lowered the contract as if the paper had become dangerous. The clock clicked again. 11:59. 1 minute before Alara was supposed to lose everything. Rowan reached for the transfer contract, held it between two fingers, and tore it cleanly down the center. The sound was soft, almost nothing, yet it seemed to echo through every corner of Silverpine Hall. Gasps broke out. Mason took a step forward. "You cannot just void a signed pack order." Rowan turned his golden eyes on him. "I can." 2 words. No raised voice. No explanation. The kind of power that did not need to prove itself because every wolf in the room already knew. Then Rowan faced the court. The challenge has been heard. Alara's knees nearly weakened, but she forced herself to stay upright. Her body was shaking now, not from cold, not only from fear, but from the impossible feeling that the ground beneath her life had split open and revealed a road she had never known was there. Rowan looked back at her, and his voice lowered until it belonged only to the space between them. "Until the moon leaves its height, you are under the protection of my throne." Alara should have felt saved. Instead, terror and hope tangled so tightly in her chest that she could barely breathe. Because a wolf did not survive by stepping from one cage into another, even if the second cage was made of black marble and crowned in gold. She looked at the king who had just shattered her sentence with his bare hands, and every instinct she trusted whispered the same warning. He had not freed her because she was nothing. He had stopped them because he knew something about her that she did not. Rowan leaned just slightly closer, his voice a low growl beneath the ringing silence of the court. "And before midnight ends, Alara Hayes, you will tell me why your blood is calling to mine." Alara did not answer because there was no answer inside her. Only a terrible ringing silence where certainty should have been. Rowan Blackthorn had spoken her name like it belonged in his mouth, like he had known it before the court did, and the sound of it left her unsteady. Around them, Silverpine Hall held its breath. The torn halves of the transfer contract lay on the marble between Rowan and Mason like the remains of a future Alara had barely escaped. The clock above the arch began its final slow turn toward midnight, but no one moved to stop the king. No one dared. Mason's jaw tightened, pride and fear wrestling across his face. "Your Majesty, with respect, Silverpine has protocols. She cannot simply be removed from our records because she made a reckless scene." Rowan's gaze slid to him. "She was never a record." Mason flinched as if the words had touched something raw. Vanessa recovered enough to step forward, her diamonds flashing beneath the chandeliers. "Then let the court examine her properly. If there is something unusual about her blood, surely it should be verified before any royal protection is granted." Her voice was smooth, but Alara heard the fear underneath it. Vanessa was not afraid for the law. She was afraid of what Rowan had seen. Alara's stomach tightened. All her life, people had inspected her for flaws. Her silent wolf, her low rank, her empty prospects, her lack of family. She could not bear the thought of standing in the center of another circle while strangers decided what she was worth. But before her fear could reach her face, Rowan shifted one step closer, placing himself between her and Vanessa without ever turning his back fully to the room. The movement was quiet, possessive, final. "The court will examine nothing tonight." Vanessa's smile strained. "But she is not marked, Your Majesty. She is not trained. She has no standing." Rowan looked down at Alara then, and for one breath she forgot the ballroom, forgot the whispers, forgot the clock. His eyes were still gold, but there was something controlled behind them, something ancient held on a tight leash. He was not looking at a burden. He was looking at a question he had spent years trying to answer. Standing is given by power, he said. And power has a way of hiding where cowards refuse to look. A murmur swept through the hall. Alara felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she refused to let tears fall. She had wanted someone to say she mattered for so long that hearing it now from the most dangerous man in the kingdom felt almost cruel. Hope could hurt worse than shame when it arrived too late. Mason took another step, anger finally breaking through his polished mask. She was promised to me once. I know her better than anyone here. There is no power in her. Something. Inside, Alara twisted. Not grief. Not anymore. Recognition. Mason had never known her. He had known the version of her that made him feel generous when he defended her and important when he abandoned her. Rowan's hand flexed at his side, but his voice stayed low. You knew what you were allowed to see. Then he lifted his eyes to the court. The challenge has been accepted. Alara Hayes is under my protection until the moon completes its height. Any claim against her, any debt placed on her, any insult disguised as law, is suspended by royal decree. The Silverpine elders bowed their heads one by one, some with fear, some with resentment, all with obedience. Alara's lungs pulled in air too quickly. Accepted. The word should have meant rescue, but it sounded like a gate closing behind her. She had challenged a king in desperation, thinking death or punishment might be the only escape from Black Hollow. Instead, the king had chosen to step into the ruin of her life and call it royal business. Vanessa's voice cut through the hush, sharper now. This is absurd. I carry beta blood from 3 noble lines. I have trained since childhood to stand beside an alpha. If the throne requires a mate from Silverpine, there are better options. Rowan did not even look at her. The dismissal landed harder than an argument. Vanessa's cheeks colored, her perfect composure cracking. Alara saw it and felt no satisfaction, only a distant ache. She had envied Vanessa once, not for the gowns or the jewels, but for the certainty. Vanessa had always walked through rooms as if every door had been built for her. Tonight, for the first time, a door had opened for Alara, and Vanessa could not bear the sound. Mason reached for Vanessa's hand, but his eyes stayed on Alara with a strange new calculation, as if she had become property whose value he had misread. That look chilled her more than his rejection had. Rowan noticed. The air tightened. Do not look at her like you are reconsidering a mistake. Mason's face hardened. I am only concerned for my pack. No, Rowan said. You are concerned that something you discarded may outrank you. The ballroom went utterly still. Alara's breath caught. And beneath her wrist, the crescent scar warmed. Not painfully, not brightly, just enough for her to feel the pulse of it under the ribbon. Rowan felt it too. His attention snapped back to her, and for the first time, his control seemed to strain. The golden ring around his pupils sharpened. Somewhere deep inside Alara, that impossible hidden thing stirred again, pressing toward him like a hand against glass. She stepped back without meaning to. Rowan saw the fear at once and stopped himself from moving closer. That restraint unsettled her more than pursuit would have. Every alpha she had known filled space until others surrendered it. Rowan held his power still and made the whole room surrender anyway. I will not harm you, he said, so quietly only she and the nearest wolves could hear. Alara wanted to believe him. Her heart wanted it with a foolish, dangerous hunger. But she had learned that promises spoken by powerful men often came with chains hidden beneath them. Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You heard them. You saw what they think I am. Rowan's gaze dropped again to the loosened ribbon at her wrist. I saw what they missed. Before she could ask what that meant, the grandfather clock released its first midnight chime. The sound rolled through Silverpine Hall, deep and solemn. 1. Every wolf turned toward the arch as if the old magic in the walls had awakened. 2. The chandeliers dimmed, silver flames thinning into moonlit blue. 3. The doors at the far end of the ballroom opened on their own, and cold night air swept across the marble. Alara shivered. Beyond those doors waited the royal convoy, black carriages and armored vehicles lined beneath snow-dusted pines, Northfawn guards standing like shadows in the winter dark. Rowan extended one hand toward her, palm open, not touching, not demanding, yet carrying the weight of a command the entire kingdom would obey. Come with me. Alara looked at his hand, then at Mason, whose expression had gone tight with disbelief, then at Vanessa, whose smile had vanished completely. A few minutes ago, They had expected to watch her be erased from Silverpine. Now they were watching the Alpha King offer her a way out. But a way out was not the same as freedom. Her pulse beat hard against the crescent scar. "And if I refuse?" she asked. A whisper of shock passed through the court. Rowan's mouth curved faintly, not with amusement, but with something darker and almost respectful. "Then I will still void the transfer. I will still forbid Black Hollow from touching your name. And I will wait until you decide whether fear gets to choose your future." Alara stared at him. No one had ever given her that kind of answer. No one had ever placed a door in front of her without shoving her through it. The last midnight chime faded. Snow blew in through the open doors, carrying the scent of pine and cold stars. Alara's fingers trembled as she lifted her hand and placed it in his. The moment their skin touched, the hidden thing inside her chest surged awake with a silent, breathless cry. Rowan went still. His eyes flashed gold, and every wolf in the hall lowered their head at once. Alara tried to pull back, startled, but his fingers closed around hers with careful strength. Not trapping, anchoring. His voice dropped into a growl meant only for her. "There you are." The doors of Silverpine Hall closed behind Alara with a sound that felt too final to be only wood and iron. One moment, she had been standing under chandeliers while everyone waited for her to disappear. The next, she was seated inside the Alpha King's private convoy, watching the only pack she had ever known shrink behind frosted glass. Snow swept across the road in silver sheets, glowing beneath the headlights of the royal vehicles. Northfang guards rode ahead and behind them, their dark uniforms marked with the Black Wolf crest, their presence so disciplined that not a single voice broke the silence. Alara sat on the far side of the leather seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the ribbon around her wrist pulled back into place. Rowan Blackthorn sat across from her, not beside her, his broad frame still as the winter woods beyond the window. He had not touched her again after helping her into the car. He had not tried to explain the way every wolf in that ballroom had lowered their head. When her hand met his, somehow, that silence made her more aware of him. The air inside the car carried cedar, cold pine, and the faint scent of rain on stone. Her heart had not slowed since midnight. Every time the convoy took a curve, the moonlight slid over Rowan's face, catching the hard line of his jaw, the shadow under his eyes, the gold that still lingered there like a banked fire. He looked less like a man who had saved her and more like a storm that had decided, for reasons of its own, not to break. Alara looked away first. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Rowan's gaze lifted from the dark window. Northfang Palace. Her throat tightened. Everyone knew stories about Northfang Palace, a fortress beyond the northern ridge, built where the forest grew black and the snow never fully melted. A place where kings were crowned, traitors were judged, and old magic slept under stone. "Am I a guest there?" she asked. "For tonight. And after tonight?" Rowan was quiet long enough for her skin to prickle. "That depends on what your blood reveals." The words settled between them, heavy and cold. Alara turned her wrist under her fingers, feeling the hidden crescent scar pulse beneath the ribbon. "You keep saying things like that, but I do not know anything about my blood." "I believe you." He said it without hesitation, and that hurt in a way suspicion would not have. She had spent so long defending herself against things she had never done that being believed made her feel suddenly, dangerously young. The convoy climbed higher into the mountains, leaving paved road for a private lane cut through towering pines. After nearly 40 minutes, iron gates appeared ahead, taller than any building in Silverpine's town square, marked with the same Black Wolf crest. They opened before the first vehicle reached them. Beyond the gates, Northfang Palace rose from the mountainside in tiers of black stone and silver-lit windows, its towers sharp against the moon, its walls wrapped in snow and shadow. Alara's breath caught despite herself. It was beautiful in the way a blade could be beautiful, all clean lines and quiet danger. The car stopped at the base of wide steps. Before a guard could open her door, Rowan was already outside, the cold folding around him like it belonged to him. He offered his hand again. Alara hesitated only a second before taking it. The reaction was smaller this time, but still there, a soft shock under her skin, a soundless pull beneath her ribs. Rowan felt it. She knew he did, because his fingers stilled around hers before he released her. Inside, the palace was warmer than she expected, lit by long rows of silver lamps and massive fireplaces that threw amber light across black marble floors. Servants bowed as Rowan passed. Guards lowered their eyes. No one stared openly at Alara, but she felt every hidden question following the frayed hem of her dress. At the top of the stairs, 3 elders waited in dark formal robes. The oldest woman stepped forward, her gray hair braided with silver cord, her gaze landing at once on Alara's wrist. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "the claim chamber has been prepared, as required by ancient law." Alara's stomach dropped. Claim chamber. The words wrapped around her like a hand closing over her breath. Rowan's expression did not change. "No one enters it." The elder blinked. But the challenge was accepted before midnight. "If the bond has awakened, delaying the rite may strain your wolf." A shadow crossed Rowan's face, gone almost before Alara could name it. "My wolf is my concern." Another elder, a narrow man with pale eyes, glanced at Alara as if she were a sealed box that might contain either treasure or disaster. "With respect, Your Majesty, an untrained Omega cannot stand near royal magic without risk. If she is what you suspect, the longer the bond remains unanchored, the more unstable the night becomes." Alara's breath turned shallow. Unstable for who? The elders went silent. That silence told her enough. Rowan turned his head toward them, and the temperature in the hall seemed to fall. "She is standing here. Speak to her, not around her." The oldest elder swallowed. "For you, Miss Hayes. And for him. The Alpha King carries an old bloodline. A bond with him is not like ordinary pack magic." Alara looked at Rowan. He had gone very still. Suddenly the stories Mason had whispered when they were children came back to her. That Rowan Blackthorn's wolf was ancient, that Northfang kings were born with too much power, that the wrong mate could lose herself trying to hold the bond. Fear moved through her, sharp and clean. Had he saved her only because she might be strong enough to survive him? Had she traded Black Hollow for a prettier cage with a throne at its center? Rowan must have seen the thought cross her face because his jaw tightened. "Alara." She stepped back. Not far, only 1 step, but every guard in the hall noticed. "So did he." The elder man spoke softly. "The moon is still high. If the rite is completed tonight, the law will recognize her as protected beyond dispute." Right. Completed. Law. Protected. Words that should have meant safety, but they crowded around her until she could not breathe. She saw the claim chamber doors beyond the hall, carved with wolves circling a full moon. She imagined walking through them with no idea what she was agreeing to, while strangers waited outside to decide whether she survived being chosen. Her skin prickled. The hidden thing in her chest pressed hard, restless, frightened, awake. "I need air," she whispered. Rowan took 1 step toward her, then stopped himself. "The east terrace is through that arch." He pointed, giving her a way out instead of closing the distance. That should have calmed her. Instead, it made the panic worse, because part of her wanted to trust him, and she did not trust that part at all. Alara walked toward the arch without looking back. Then she walked faster. The terrace doors opened onto a sweep of moonlit stone and a staircase descending into the palace gardens. Cold air rushed over her face, clearing her lungs. She heard no footsteps behind her, no command, no order to stop. That made running feel possible. So she ran. Down the steps, across the frozen garden paths, past statues half buried in snow, toward the black line of the forest beyond the palace wall. Her shoes slipped on icy stone, her breath tearing white clouds from her chest, but she kept going. She did not know where the road was. She did not know how far she was from Silverpine or whether Black Hollow still waited somewhere in the dark. She only knew that she could not stand still while another room, another law, another powerful man decided the shape of her life. The forest swallowed her in shadow. Snow soaked the hem of her dress. Branches brushed her arms. Behind her, the palace remained silent. Too silent. Alara stopped between 2 pines, gasping, one hand braced against the rough bark. No alarm sounded. No guard shouted. The quiet pressed in, deep and watchful. Then the wind shifted. The scent of cedar and winter storm wrapped around her before his voice reached her. "You dared me before my throne." Alara turned slowly, heart slamming against her ribs. Rowan stood several yards away between the trees, black coat moving in the wind, gold eyes bright in the darkness. He had not chased her with guards. He had come alone. I did not know what it meant, she said, her voice shaking. Yes, he said. You did. She backed up until the tree touched her shoulders. Rowan did not move closer. Somehow, that restraint made the space between them feel even more dangerous. You thought a king would be easier to survive than the men selling you. Alara's throat tightened because it was true. Because he had seen the ugliest part of her choice and had not looked away. Are you going to drag me back? She asked. His eyes flicked over her face, her shaking hands, the snow caught in her hair. When he answered, his voice was low enough to blend with the wind. No. Relief hit her so fast her knees weakened. Then he added, but I will not pretend you can outrun what woke when you touched my hand. The crescent scar beneath her ribbon warmed like moonlight under skin. Deep in her chest, the hidden thing stirred again, no longer only afraid. Listening, Rowan's gaze dropped to her wrist, then rose to her eyes. Run from the palace if you need to. Run from the court. Run from every wolf who ever made you feel small. He stepped one pace closer, slow enough that she could have moved away. She did not. His voice lowered into a growl that seemed to vibrate through the snow beneath them. But from this bond, Alara, it is too late to run. Alara expected Rowan to close the distance after that. Expected the ancient power in him to become a command. Expected the forest itself to bend until there was nowhere left for her to go. Instead, he stopped 3 feet away and let the silence breathe between them. Snow drifted through the black branches, soft as ash, catching in his dark hair and along the shoulders of his coat. His gold eyes remained fixed on her, not gentle, not harmless, but controlled with such force that Alara could almost feel the strain of it in the air. Her back pressed against the pine tree. Her lungs burned from running. Beneath the ribbon on her wrist, the crescent scar pulsed with a warmth that did not belong to winter. I challenged you because I was desperate, she said, the truth scraping her throat. Not because I wanted to belong to another alpha. Rowan's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low. I know. The answer unsettled her. Mason would have argued. Silverpine would have corrected her. Vanessa would have smiled and turned her fear into entertainment for the room. Rowan only stood there in the snow and looked as if every word mattered. Alara swallowed hard. Then why did you accept? The wind moved through the trees. Far behind them, Northfong Palace glowed through the branches, all silver windows and black stone, beautiful and impossible. Rowan did not look back at it. Because if I had not, Silverpine would have finished selling you before the last chime faded. So you claimed the challenge to save me. I accepted the challenge to stop them. His eyes lowered to her wrist. Claiming you is not the same thing. Alara's breath caught. She had not known there could be a difference. Every law she had grown up under made power sound simple. An alpha chose. A pack obeyed. A weaker wolf endured. But Rowan spoke as if the space between protection and possession was not only real, but sacred. Her fingers curled against the rough bark behind her. The elders said the rite had to be completed. The elders have advised kings for centuries, Rowan said. They are useful. They are not my conscience. Something in her chest twisted, painful and bright. She wanted to distrust him. She needed to. Trust had cost her too much already. Yet his restraint felt heavier than any chain because it offered her something she had never practiced holding. Choice. Rowan turned slightly, giving her the path back toward the palace but not ordering her onto it. You can stay in the forest until dawn if that is what you need. Guards will keep the boundary clear. No one from Silverpine or Black Hollow will cross it. Alara stared at him. You would let me stand out here all night? I would prefer you did not freeze. His gaze flicked over her thin dress, and something dark moved behind his eyes. But yes, the simple word struck her harder than any command. Her throat tightened. The snow had soaked through her shoes. Her hands were numb. Fear still shook in her bones, but the panic had begun to loosen, leaving exhaustion behind. And if the bond hurts you? She asked before she could stop herself. Rowan went very still. For the first time, he looked away. Not far, only toward the moonlit snow at his feet, but it was enough for Alara to understand that she had touched a truth he had not meant to show. My wolf has survived worse. That is not an answer. His mouth curved faintly, without humor. No, it is not. The honesty was worse than reassurance. It made him feel less like a legend and more like a man carrying a locked room inside himself. Alara took one careful breath, then another. If I go back, I do not go to that chamber. Rowan's eyes returned to hers. No, No elders deciding what I am while I stand there like evidence. No, no one touches the mark on my wrist. His gaze sharpened at the word mark, but he nodded once. No one. Alara studied him, searching for the hidden hook beneath the promise. She found only stillness, cold and absolute. It should have frightened her. It did frighten her. But it also steadied something that had been shaking since Silverpine. Slowly, she pushed away from the tree. Rowan did not reach for her. He waited while she took one step, then another, until she stood beside him instead of cornered before him. The forest seemed to exhale. The warmth under her wrist softened, turning from pulse to glow. Rowan noticed. His expression changed by a fraction, and Alara wondered how much he could sense. Too much, maybe. Not enough, maybe. They walked back through the snow without speaking. He adjusted his pace to hers, though his legs were longer and the cold did not seem to bother him. Once, her foot slipped on a buried root, and his hand lifted as if to catch her, then stopped before touching her. Alara saw it. She should have been embarrassed. Instead, she felt the strange ache again, that foolish hunger for a world where power did not always take. When they reached the terrace steps, the oldest elder waited near the open doors with 2 guards and a face full of worry. Your Majesty, the moon is still at height. The chamber remains prepared. Rowan's voice cut through the cold. Seal it. The elder blinked. Seal it. Until I order otherwise. The elder looked from Rowan to Alara, then lowered her head. As you command. Alara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Inside the palace, the halls felt different now. Still enormous, still watched, but not quite a cage. Rowan led her away from the carved claim chamber doors and into a quieter wing where the walls were lined with old portraits and moonlit windows. Servants appeared with a warm cloak, dry shoes, and tea that smelled like honey and cloves. Alara accepted them with hands that trembled only slightly. Rowan remained near the doorway, giving her distance even in the room, he clearly ruled. Why are you doing this? She asked. Do not say because of my blood. His gaze held hers. Because you were shaking when they spoke of the right. She looked down at the cup in her hands. Steam brushed her face, and for one dangerous second, tears pressed hot behind her eyes. Not because she was weak. Because no one had ever stopped a law for the sake of her fear. Rowan's voice lowered. An alpha can win a challenge. A king can enforce a bond. But I will not claim a woman who is bracing herself like the world is about to take another piece of her. The cup nearly slipped from Alara's fingers. She tightened her grip and forced herself to breathe. Before she could answer, a sound moved through the palace, low and distant. Not a howl exactly, but something close enough to make every lamp flicker. Rowan's face hardened. The guards outside the door straightened. Alara's scar flashed warm beneath the ribbon, and deep inside her chest, the hidden presence stirred with sudden urgency. That night, when the palace finally quieted and Alara was given a room with a locked door that locked from the inside, she lay awake beneath heavy blankets, staring at the silver light across the ceiling. She told herself she would not sleep. She told herself she would not dream. But exhaustion pulled her under anyway. In the dream, she stood in a white forest beneath a moon so large it filled the sky. A wolf waited between the trees, its fur bright as snow, its eyes the same gray-blue as hers. Silver chains wrapped around its body, not cutting, not breaking, but holding it back from the world. Alara could not move. Her breath caught as the wolf lowered its head and pressed its nose to the crescent scar on her wrist. A voice rose inside her, familiar and ancient, soft enough to be her own thought and strong enough to shake the moonlight. He is not the danger, it whispered. The chains trembled. Somewhere beyond the dream, a black wolf answered from the dark. The white wolf lifted its head. The ones who hit us are. Alara woke before sunrise with the words still inside her, quiet and unshakable, as if they had been carved beneath her ribs while she slept. The ones who hit us are. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The ceiling above her was too high, crossed with dark beams and silver morning light. The blankets were too warm. The room smelled faintly of cedar smoke and lavender. Not the cold laundry room beside the Silverpine kitchens where she had slept most of her life. Then she saw the locked door, the key still resting on the nightstand where she had placed it herself, and memory returned in pieces. The ballroom, the torn contract, the forest, Rowan's voice in the snow, the white wolf bound in moonlit chains. Her breath caught. She pushed back the blankets and sat up, pressing one hand over the ribbon on her wrist. The crescent scar was warm. Not burning, not painful, but awake. A soft knock sounded at the door. Alara went still. "Miss Hayes," a woman called gently from the hallway. "His Majesty requests your presence in the lower archive. He said you may refuse." The last sentence landed harder than the invitation. "You may refuse." Alara stared at the door, heart beating fast. Every part of her wanted answers. Every wounded part of her feared the price of receiving them. In the end, she dressed in the simple dark sweater and wool skirt left folded over a chair, clothes that fit as if someone had measured her without touching her, and followed the servant through Northfong Palace. Morning had not softened the fortress. It only revealed more of it. Black stone corridors, windows overlooking miles of white forest, guards who bowed without staring. The lower archive sat beneath the eastern tower, behind a circular door engraved with wolves and phases of the moon. Rowan waited inside, alone, standing beside a long table covered in old maps, sealed files, and a single silver box. He wore no crown, only a dark shirt with the sleeves turned back, but the room still seemed built around him. Alara stopped at the doorway. "You said I could refuse." He looked up. "You can, but you knew I would come. I hoped you would." The difference mattered. She stepped inside. The archive door remained open behind her. Rowan noticed her glance and said, "It stays open unless you close it." Alara hated how much relief that gave her. She approached the table slowly. The maps showed places she had only heard in warnings. The northern ridge, the old border packs, the ruined valley of Moonvale. Her fingers hovered above the name. Moonvale. The word pulled at something in her chest, soft and painful. "What is this?" she whispered. Rowan opened the silver box. Inside lay a faded photograph, a child's moonstone bracelet, and a folded letter sealed in cracked white wax. Alara's throat tightened before she understood why. The woman in the photograph stood in front of a cabin framed by pine trees, her brown hair falling over one shoulder, her gray-blue eyes so much like Alara's that the room seemed to tilt. In her arms, wrapped in a pale blanket, was a little girl with a crescent mark on her wrist. Alara's hand flew to her mouth. "Who is she?" Rowan's voice softened without losing its depth. "Celine Hayes." Alara shook her head once. "My mother was a pack servant. That is what Silverpine told me. Your mother was the last sworn guardian of the Moon Queen bloodline." The words made no sense. They were too large for the life Alara had lived. She looked at the photograph again, at the woman's tired smile, at the baby's tiny hand resting against the blanket. Her eyes burned. "No," it came out barely audible. Rowan did not argue. He reached for one of the files and turned it toward her. 18 years ago, Moonvale was attacked because of a prophecy. A she-wolf born with the crescent mark would one day command royal wolf magic and stand beside the Alpha King, not beneath him. Alara's breath thinned. The dream wolf flashed in her mind. White fur, silver chains, eyes like hers. "That is impossible. It is why they hid you." She stepped back from the table, shaking her head harder. "No. If I were anything like that, I would have felt it. I would have shifted. I would have had a wolf." Rowan's gaze dropped to her wrist. "You did. It was sealed." The word struck her like cold water. Sealed. Not absent. Not broken. Sealed. Alara gripped the edge of the table, suddenly unsure if her knees would hold her. All the years of shame. All the ceremonies where other girls first heard their wolves. All the nights Mason told her it did not matter that she was different because he would protect her anyway. Every memory bent under the weight of that single word. Who would do that to a child, she asked. Rowan was silent for a moment. A mother who believed it was the only way to keep her child alive. Alara looked at him sharply. His expression had hardened, not with judgment, but with an old grief he had learned to keep under lock. Celine erased your scent, buried your wolf beneath moonstone binding, and sent you to Silverpine under a servant name. Most of the court believed the Moonvale child died that night. Most. Rowan's eyes met hers. My wolf did not. The room seemed to narrow around them. Alara's heartbeat became too loud. What does that mean? Rowan looked toward the open door, as if the answer waited somewhere beyond the stone walls and snow. I was 13 when Moonvale fell. Too young to rule, old enough to remember the firelight on the mountains. That night, my wolf heard another wolf calling through the bond. Not words. Not fully. Just fear, and a name I did not know how to find. Alara's fingers curled against the table. Mine. Yours. The answer was quiet, final, and it frightened her more than if he had shouted. Rowan stepped to the map and touched the old valley with 2 fingers. For 18 years, Northfong searched for a child with a crescent scar and no scent trail. Every lead failed. Every witness vanished into silence. Then last night, you stood in my court, and your blood answered mine before I ever touched you. Alara's throat closed. She wanted to be angry at him, at Celine, at the dead, at every adult who had built her life out of lies and called it protection. Anger came, hot and sudden, because it was easier than grief. So that is why you stopped them. Not because I was Alara. Because I was the missing girl from your prophecy. Rowan's eyes sharpened. I stopped them because they were wrong. That is not the same as choosing me. No, his honesty hit again, clean and merciless. It is not. Alara looked away first. She hated that answer and respected it in the same breath. Then what are you choosing now? Rowan came around the table, slow enough that she could step back if she wished. She did not. To find out who betrayed your mother's hiding place. To learn who sent Black Hollow for you last night. To keep my court from turning you into a weapon before you decide who you are. Her eyes stung. And the bond. His jaw tightened. The bond can wait for your consent. The words settled between them like a bridge neither of them had expected to find. Before Alara could answer, the open archive door filled with hurried footsteps. The oldest elder appeared, pale and breathless, a sealed message clutched in her hand. Your Majesty, Silverpine delegates have arrived at the outer gate. Rowan did not turn at once. His attention remained on Alara. Who? The elder. Swallowed. Mason Vale and Vanessa Hart. They brought witnesses, and they are demanding a royal hearing. Alara's stomach dropped. Rowan's expression went dangerously still. On what charge? The elder looked at Alara then, and pity flickered across her face like a candle in wind. Blood witchcraft. They claim Miss Hayes forged the crescent mark to deceive the throne. For one heartbeat, the archive was silent. Then Alara felt it. Beneath her skin, beneath the ribbon, beneath every lie that had ever been placed over her name, the white wolf lifted its head. The royal hearing was called before noon, but the sky outside Northfong Palace had already darkened, as if evening had come early to watch. Alara stood in a private antechamber beside the moon court doors, her hands cold, her pulse beating beneath the crescent scar on her wrist. The ribbon was gone now. Rowan had not asked her to hide it. That should have made her feel stronger. Instead, the exposed mark felt like a lantern held in a storm, bright enough to guide, bright enough to make her a target. Beyond the carved doors, voices gathered in low, restless waves. Elders, royal advisors, visiting alphas, witnesses from Silverpine, all summoned by an accusation that had found its way through the palace faster than smoke. Blood witchcraft. False mark. Deceiver of the throne. The words should have sounded ridiculous after everything Rowan had shown her in the archive, but shame had a memory. It knew the path back into her bones. Rowan stood several feet away near the window, his posture controlled, his face unreadable. Only his hands betrayed him, fingers curling once before stilling at his sides. The oldest elder, Miriam, stood between them with a silver folder pressed to her chest. Your Majesty, I must advise caution. Rowan did not look at her. I am listening. Miriam's eyes flicked toward Alara, then away. If you defend Miss Hayes by force of authority before the Moonstone test, the court will claim bias. They will say the bond has compromised your judgment. The room went colder. Alara saw Rowan's jaw harden. My judgment is not on trial. No, Miriam said carefully. But hers is. Alara's throat tightened. Rowan turned then, and the gold in his eyes had sharpened into something that made Miriam lower her head. Choose your next words. The elder swallowed. If she is truly marked by Moon Queen blood, the stone will answer her. Publicly, no argument will survive it. But until then, you must not interfere. Alara understood before Rowan spoke. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. You want him to stand there while they call me a liar. Miriam's face softened. I want the court to lose the right to keep calling you one. The answer was practical, maybe even wise. It still hurt. Alara looked at Rowan, waiting for him to refuse. Waiting for the king who had torn her transfer contract in half to tear this accusation apart just as easily. But Rowan was silent. Not because he did not care. She could see the restraint in him, fierce and terrible, a locked gate under pressure. Still, the silence reached into an old wound and found the shape of Mason standing beside Vanessa, the shape of elders looking away, the shape of every moment she had needed someone powerful to speak and been left alone instead. Her breath caught. Rowan saw it. His expression shifted, barely, but enough. Alara. She stepped back before he could come closer. Do not. The word left her sharper than she intended. His eyes darkened. I am not abandoning you. That is what it feels like when powerful people explain why silence is necessary. Pain moved across his face so quickly she almost missed it. Then the court doors opened. A guard bowed. They are ready. Alara walked in first because if she waited, fear might fasten itself around her ankles and keep her there. The moon court was circular, built beneath a glass dome that showed the heavy gray sky above the mountain. At the center of the room stood a white stone pedestal veined with silver, and atop it rested the moonstone, dull and smooth, no larger than a human heart. Around the chamber rose tiers of black benches filled with wolves from half a dozen packs. Their whispers cut off when Alara entered, but their stares did not. Vanessa stood on the far side of the chamber in a cream-colored coat trimmed with white fur, polished and composed, her golden hair pinned perfectly, her eyes bright with the kind of confidence that came from believing the room already belonged to her. Mason stood beside her, pale but determined, his father and two Silverpine elders behind him. When Rowan entered after Alara, every wolf rose. He did not take the throne at the head of the chamber. He stood to the right of the moonstone, silent, hands clasped behind his back, the black wolf crest on his coat catching the light. His stillness drew every eye, but his gaze stayed on Alara. Mason spoke first, and his voice carried the practiced sorrow of a man pretending duty pained him. Your Majesty, honorable elders, I regret bringing this matter before the court. But Silverpine cannot ignore evidence that Alara Hayes has practiced forbidden blood magic to counterfeit a royal mark. Alara's skin prickled. Vanessa stepped forward with a small velvet pouch. We found this among her belongings after she left Silverpine. She opened it and withdrew a tiny glass vial sealed with red wax, holding it up as if it were proof of a crime rather than a prop in a performance. Witch blood mixed with moonstone dust, enough to create a temporary mark and influence a weakened bond. A murmur swept the chamber. Alara stared at the vial, stunned by the neatness of the lie. She had never seen it before, but Vanessa held it with such delicate disgust that Alara almost felt dirty for being near it. That is not mine, she said. Mason looked at her with sad eyes that did not reach his mouth. Alara, please, do not make this worse. The words hit with humiliating familiarity. Please, as if he were helping her, as if her denial were another inconvenience he had to manage. Her hands trembled, and she curled them into fists. You do not get to speak to me like you are protecting me. Vanessa smiled softly. No one is trying to hurt you. We are trying to protect the throne from a desperate girl who confused humiliation with destiny. The court shifted. Some faces hardened. Others looked away. Alara felt the old room closing around her, the invisible circle where she was always too small to be believed and too powerless to matter. She turned toward Rowan despite herself. He stood still, silent, golden eyes fixed on her, not cold, not doubtful, but silent. The ache in her chest spread. Miriam's warning echoed in her mind. The court must lose the right. The court must see. But seeing required her to stand there while the lie wrapped itself around her name. An elder from the western tier rose. The charge has been entered. Miss Hayes will submit to the moonstone test. If her blood answers false, the royal protection will be suspended pending judgment. Alara's breath went thin. And if it answers true? The elder hesitated. Rowan's voice cut across the chamber, low and lethal. Then every wolf who repeated this accusation will kneel. Silence fell. It was not a defense, not exactly. But it was a promise, and it steadied the shaking place inside her just enough to keep her upright. Vanessa's smile flickered, then returned. Let the stone decide. Alara stepped toward the pedestal. Each footstep sounded too loud. The moonstone waited, pale and lifeless, reflecting nothing. Miriam approached with a small silver lancet, but Alara lifted her hand away. No, the elder froze. A ripple went through the court. Alara looked at Vanessa, then Mason, then the Silverpine elders who had helped turn her life into a transaction. Her voice shook, but it did not break. I have been handled like evidence since I was a child. Not today. She took the lancet from Miriam herself. It was cold and light. Rowan's eyes never left her. Alara touched the point to her finger and let one bright drop fall onto the moonstone. The chamber held its breath. Nothing happened. 1 second passed, then 5, then 10. The stone remained dull. A whisper rose from the benches. Vanessa's lips parted in slow, shining triumph. Mason exhaled as if relieved. Alara, he said softly, cruelly, it is over. Shame surged hot behind her eyes. The floor blurred. Across the room, Rowan took half a step forward, and every elder tensed. He stopped himself. That restraint, that necessary silence, struck her harder than Vanessa's smile. The old wound split open completely. She had been foolish to hope the world would change just because a king had looked at her differently. Vanessa crossed the space between them with graceful steps and stopped close enough that only Alara could hear the sweetness turn rotten. You should have stayed unwanted. At least then you were harmless. Alara's breath caught. The white wolf inside her lifted its head. Not crying. Not hiding. Listening. Vanessa raised her voice for the court. The mark is false. She deceived the king, shamed Silverpine, and endangered every pack represented here. The chamber erupted in whispers. Alara looked down at the moonstone, at the single drop of blood sitting dark and still on its surface. Her heart hammered. Her throat tightened. Her skin prickled from wrist to shoulder. Something deep inside her pressed against invisible chains, not asking permission anymore. The clock above the court doors began to chime noon, 12 hours after the night that had shattered her life. With the first chime, the crescent scar on Alara's wrist flashed silver beneath the open sky. With the second, the moonstone gave a sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Every whisper died. Vanessa's smile vanished. Mason stepped back. Rowan's eyes burned gold. And inside Alara, the white wolf opened both eyes. The crack in the moonstone widened beneath Alara's blood, a thin silver line cutting through the dull surface like dawn breaking under ice. No one in the moon court moved. No one whispered. Even the wind above the glass dome seemed to stop. Alara stared at the stone, breath trapped in her chest, while the crescent scar on her wrist burned brighter and brighter until silver light spilled over her fingers. The second noon chime faded. The third began. With it, the moonstone lifted from the pedestal without any hand touching it. Vanessa made a small sound and stepped back, her polished confidence falling away so quickly that Alara almost did not recognize her. Mason's face had gone gray. Around the circular chamber, alpha heirs and elders who had stared at Alara like she was evidence now lowered their eyes against the light pouring from her blood. The white wolf inside her rose. Alara felt it not as a beast breaking free, but as a missing half of her soul standing up after years in chains. Her spine straightened. Her breath deepened. The fear that had lived in her body for so long did not vanish, but it no longer ruled the room. The silver light spread across the floor in a wide circle, touching the boots of every wolf present. One by one, they sank to their knees. Not from injury, not from force that harmed them, from recognition older than law. Miriam pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Moon Queen blood, she whispered. The words moved through the court like a bell struck in the bones. Moon Queen blood. Alara looked at her own glowing wrist, then at the image forming in the light behind her. A great white wolf, taller than any wolf she had ever seen, its fur bright as snowfall beneath a full moon, its gray-blue eyes calm, ancient, and hers. The silver chains from her dream hung broken at its feet, dissolving into sparks. Alara's throat tightened. All her life, she had believed the emptiness inside her meant she was less than everyone else. Now she understood. It had never been emptiness. It had been a locked kingdom waiting for the key. Vanessa stumbled against the edge of the pedestal. No, she breathed. That is not real. She was nothing. She was always nothing. The white wolf turned its head. The movement was silent, but Vanessa flinched as if truth itself had looked at her. Mason reached for Vanessa's arm, then seemed to remember every eye in the court was on them and stopped. There must be an explanation, he said, though his voice had lost its strength. The stone was delayed. The test was influenced somehow. Rowan finally moved. Until that moment, he had stood to the right of the moonstone with the restraint of a king holding back a storm. Now he stepped forward, Not toward Mason, not toward Vanessa, but toward Alara. Every kneeling wolf bowed lower as he passed. His golden eyes never left her face. Alara expected him to stand in front of her and announce his claim, expected the old pattern to return in a more beautiful form. A powerful man naming her value while the world listened. Instead, Rowan stopped several feet away and lowered himself to one knee before her. The chamber seemed to forget how to breathe. Alara's heart slammed once, hard enough to shake her. The Alpha King of North Fong, feared by every pack from the northern ridge to the southern coast, bowed his head not as a performance, not as pity, but as a choice. Alara Hayes, he said, his voice low, steady, and carrying to every tier of the court. They asked the stone to judge you because they thought it would make you small again. They were wrong. Her eyes burned, but she did not look away. Rowan lifted his gaze to hers. You were not born to stand beneath my throne. Gasps moved through the room. Vanessa looked as if the words had taken the ground from under her. Mason stared at Alara now with something worse than regret, realization. Rowan continued, each word cold and clear. You were hidden because your blood could command what others only pretend to own. You were shamed because weak people fear power they cannot control. You were called worthless by wolves who were never worthy to say your name. The white wolf behind Alara lifted its head, and the silver light brightened until the dome above them reflected a moon that was not in the daylight sky. Alara felt the bond between herself and Rowan then, not as a chain, not as a demand, but as a deep black river meeting a silver tide. His wolf was there, vast and ancient, waiting at the edge of hers, powerful enough to frighten the world and careful enough not to cross without permission. Rowan held out his hand, palm upward. If this bond is to exist, it will not begin with me taking what the law says I can have. His voice dropped, rougher now, meant for her even though everyone heard. Claim me then. The court went utterly silent. Alara stared at his offered hand. A day ago, she had been the girl Silverpine tried to transfer before midnight. A girl in a mended dress. A girl Mason rejected without looking ashamed. A girl Vanessa mocked because cruelty was easiest when the room agreed with it. Now every one of them was kneeling while Rowan Blackthorn asked her to choose. Her body trembled, but not from weakness. She stepped toward him. The white wolf moved with her, graceful and unafraid. Alara placed her hand in Rowan's. The bond answered. Instantly, a warm surge of silver and gold that filled the chamber without heat, without pain, without darkness. Rowan inhaled sharply, his control cracking just enough for awe to show through. Alara felt his wolf bow to hers, not conquered, not broken, but recognized. The crescent mark on her wrist shone against his hand. Mine, Rowan said, the word a low growl that made every wolf in the room lower their head again. Alara's fingers tightened around his. Her voice shook, but it rang clear across the moon court. Mine too. The moonstone burst into harmless silver light above them, scattering sparks like stars over the kneeling court. Vanessa covered her mouth, speechless. Mason dropped his gaze to the floor, and Alara, who had spent her life being looked through, finally stood at the center of the room, while everyone who had called her nothing watched the Alpha King rise only after she allowed it. The silver light faded slowly, leaving the moon court changed in its wake. No one rose until Alara did. That was the first truth the room had to swallow. Rowan remained beside her, his hand still linked with hers, but he did not speak over her. The white wolf behind Alara stood tall in the glow of the broken moonstone, no longer chained, no longer hidden, and the crescent mark on her wrist shone like a crown made of moonlight. Miriam stepped forward with tears bright in her eyes and bowed deeply. Alara Hayes of Moonvale, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. Last daughter of Celine Hayes, heir of the Moon Queen bloodline, true royal mate of North Fong. A sound moved through the court, not quite a gasp, not quite a prayer. Alara felt it strike her chest, the name of a mother she barely remembered, the name of a home stolen from her before she was old enough to understand loss. Rowan squeezed her hand once, steady and silent. Then Miriam turned to the assembled elders. The concealment was real. Celine Hayes sealed her daughter's wolf to save her from those hunting the prophecy. The mark was never forged. It was bound beneath moonstone until royal blood awakened it. Vanessa shook her head, her face pale beneath perfect makeup. That does not prove she did not use magic to trick him. Alara turned toward her. For the first time in her life, Vanessa looked smaller than the room she had tried to command. Alara's heart hammered, but she stepped forward alone, letting Rowan's hand slip from hers. A murmur rippled across the benches as the white wolf moved with her. "You called me worthless because you thought no one important would ever correct you," Alara said. Her voice did not shake now. "You watched Silverpine turn my life into a contract. You smiled while they tried to send me away. And when that failed, you brought a lie into this court and called it evidence." Vanessa's mouth tightened. "You cannot prove I planted anything." Rowan lifted one hand. A guard came forward carrying a sealed ledger, a stack of messages, and the red-waxed vial Vanessa had displayed. Rowan's voice was cold enough to silence every breath. Black Hollow's messenger was detained at the outer gate. He carried payment records signed by Vanessa Hart and witnessed by Mason Vale. Mason staggered back a step, then caught himself on the bench behind him. "I did not know what she was." Alara looked at him, and the old ache in her chest finally loosened. "You did not have to know I was royal to know I was a person." The words landed harder than any punishment. Mason dropped his gaze. Rowan continued. "The vial was purchased 2 days ago from an apothecary in Silverpine under Vanessa Hart's family seal. The moonstone dust inside was not used to create a mark. It was used to delay the moonstone test just long enough to make the court doubt her." Miriam took the folder from the guard and opened it before the elders. One by one, their faces hardened. Vanessa's father rose halfway from his seat, then slowly sat back down as the truth became too public to defend. Vanessa looked around for allies and found only lowered eyes. "I only did what anyone would have done," she whispered. She was supposed to say nothing. Alara felt the white wolf press warmly against her soul. She stepped closer, not with cruelty, but with the quiet strength of someone done asking permission to exist. "That is where you were wrong. I was never nothing. I was hidden. There is a difference." Rowan's eyes burned gold with pride, but he let her finish. Alara faced the court. "Silverpine taught me that silence was survival. Today, I choose something else. Vanessa Hart will not be harmed in my name. Mason Vale will not be hunted in my name. But they will lose every title they used to sell, shame, and silence weaker wolves." Rowan's mouth curved faintly, fierce and approving. "By royal decree," he said, "Vanessa Hart is stripped of claim eligibility in all noble houses until the Moon Court restores her by unanimous vote. Mason Vale is removed as alpha heir of Silverpine. Silverpine's council will answer for the illegal transfer, and every Omega contract issued under their authority will be reviewed by North Fawn." The chamber erupted, but Rowan's next word crushed the noise. "Kneel." Every alpha, elder, and witness bent before the woman they had tried to dismiss. Mason sank down first, face pale with shame. Vanessa followed last, trembling with fury she no longer had power to dress as Grace. Alara stood before them in a simple wool skirt, with no crown, no jewels, and no borrowed name. Yet the court bowed as if she had always belonged above them. Rowan turned to her then, and his voice dropped into something deep enough to touch every hidden wound from the night before. "Alara Hayes of Moonvale." He took her hand and lifted it before the court, the crescent mark shining between them. "My mate, my Luna, my queen." The words moved through her like sunlight after years underground. Her throat tightened, but this time the tears that rose did not feel like defeat. Rowan did not claim her as property. He named what she had chosen to become. Alara placed her other hand over his, her white wolf standing beside his black shadow in the silver light. "And I choose North Fong," she said. "Not because I was rescued, but because I am done running from the life they tried to bury." 3 weeks later, Silverpine Hall opened its doors again, but nothing looked the same. The chandeliers still glittered. The marble still shone. The same families stood along the walls in their best gowns and dark suits. Only this time, no one laughed when Alara entered. She walked beside Rowan in a black and silver cloak, her crescent mark uncovered, her white wolf's presence bright enough to make every candle bow toward her. A second throne had been placed beside Rowan's, equal in height, carved with a crescent moon and a black wolf. Mason stood among the stripped heirs, no longer wearing the Silverpine crest. Vanessa watched from the lower court, silent, her diamonds gone, her smile gone with them. Rowan looked across the hall where Alara had once been called unwanted, then turned to her. Do you still want to run? Alara remembered the torn contract, the cold ballroom, the moment she had dared a king because she thought she had nothing left to lose. Then she looked at the pack that had rejected her, the court that had judged her, and the Alpha King who had recognized her before she recognized herself. Her breath steadied. Her heart did not hide. She took Rowan's hand and sat beside him, not beneath him. No, she said, her voice clear enough for every wolf in Silverpine to hear. Let them watch.